The Boruto manga has a lot of mystery, whether it's Ōtsutsuki gods, stone tablets, or mysterious statues. There's something about it that makes you want to theorize and find the hidden secrets. So while I'm away, here are some of the best Boruto theories you've ever heard. Starting with, ever since the reveal of the mysterious panel in Jigen's dimension, everyone's been wondering who could be the missing Otsutsuki. This led to many theories about it being Shibai or Isshiki or even Lord Jashin. And while those theories are definitely plausible, I think we're missing the bigger picture. You see, the true identity of these Otsutsukis was hinted at in Boruto's anime, and it all ties into Boruto being the reincarnate of Kaguya's father, otherwise known as the Ox King. Now, this might sound crazy, I know, but hear me out and then you guys can tell me if it all makes sense. First thing we need to understand is that Sumeri's character is very important to the overall plot of Boruto. This goes back to Nue and the Gozo Tenno seal, which are both linked to Kaguya and the Otsutsuki. The seal itself was created by Danzo and the Root organization when they tried to replicate Kaguya's hidden jutsu as stated by Sasuke. This would then give the one who possessed the Gozo Tenno seal the ability to summon Nue from what Sumeri's father referred to as the underworld, or could just say a different dimension. Now the interesting thing about this is that, despite not possessing the Gozo Tenno seal, Boruto was somehow able to summon Nue. This was shown in episode 4 when Boruto performed the summoning jutsu despite not having a summoning contract. And while this isn't necessary to summon an animal in the Naruto universe, he shouldn't be able to summon Nue. Now some would argue that Sumeri was the one who summoned Nue then pretended as if it was Boruto, but that doesn't make sense since Sumeri later confirmed in the novels that Boruto was the first one to summon Nue. And it also would make sense from a character motive perspective since Nue didn't have enough chakra to destroy the village at that point in time. So it's pretty clear that Boruto was able to summon Nue for some reason. The real question is how. Well, you see, this all goes back to what inspired the creation of the Gozo Tenno seal, and that somewhat lies in the name itself. That's because Gozo Tenno translates to Ox-Headed Heavenly King in Japanese. In fact, Gozo Tenno is also the name of a powerful Japanese deity that also goes by the name of Muto Tenjin. This is really important because in both episode 54, Sasuke found a statue of an Otsutsuki in Kaguya's dimension, which had horns similar to that of an ox. So, if Gozo Tenno refers to the Ox King, and there's a statue in Kaguya's dimension that depicts such an entity, what exactly does this mean? Well, for one, Kishimoto likes to take elements from different stories in folklore to then mix them together and form his own narrative conclusions, and in this case, it is no different. You see, there is also another entity within Japanese folklore that is closely associated with the oxes, or the oxen, if you guys want to be grammatically correct here, and his name is Hikoboshi, otherwise known as the Kallman. His story is tied to that of Orihime, the Weaving Princess, and daughter of Tente, otherwise known as the Sky King. In summary, their story is that of two lovers who later got separated by the Sky King because they didn't fulfill their duties, to the point where they were placed on opposite ends of the universe and only allowed to meet on one day of the year, which is just crazy. The interesting thing here is that Kaguya's story, that is Kaguya from Naruto, and that of Sumeri's are both influenced by this folktale. This is shown in the fact that Kaguya was depicted as gazing at the galaxy in Shippuden episode 460, and Sumeri was shown to be doing the same thing in both episode 34, which is of course a reference to Orihime doing a similar thing, waiting for the day she could meet her lover Hikoboshi. Now this does go a bit deeper than that because Hikoboshi is also the Japanese name of the Altair star, if that's how that's pronounced, but it's a star which is the brightest star in the constellation of Aquila. There's also the fact that Boruto's new Rasengan is called Rasengan Uzuhiko, which of course plays on the Hiko part of Hikoboshi. So if one were to operate under the premise that Boruto is the reincarnation of Kaguya's father and Kaguya's father is derived from the Kallman, Hikoboshi, and the Ox King, otherwise known as Gozo Tenno, which is why the Otsutsuki statue in Kaguya's dimension has the horn of an ox, wouldn't that explain why Boruto is called the Star of Hope? Because if he's the reincarnation of Hikoboshi, which is the name of a star in Japanese, or the Star Prince, doesn't that imply a connection to this entity? This will also explain why Boruto is able to summon Nue, because if you assume that the Ox King is Kaguya's father and that was actually his castle in Kaguya's dimension, it could also be the case that he created Nue. We have to remember that it was never stated that Kaguya created the beast itself, just that the Gozo Tenno seal was a replica of Kaguya's hidden jutsu, which was intended to summon Nue. Now, how did Danzo come across this information? Who knows? Maybe Kaguya used it to summon Nue in the past and someone documented the information, somehow. Now I do think that it plays into the fact that omnipotence was used to meddle with the memories of humans in the past as implied by Momoshiki. So maybe humans as a collective at one point knew more about the Ōtsutsuki than they know now. And maybe someone was immune to the effects similar to Sarada and Sumire, and they were the ones who documented the forgotten past. But of course, we'll have to wait and see. I'll save that for another video. The point is that Boruto, being the reincarnation of Kaguya's father, the person who created Nue, is the reason why he's able to also summon Nue. In fact, it would make perfect sense to some degree in the Naruto universe, since summonings appear to be eternal because Madara was able to summon the Nine-Tails after he was brought back as an Edo Tensei. The summoning only failed because the sea restricts the Nine-Tails to Naruto's body, which implies that a contract or a connection isn't disrupted by death. So maybe this extends to reincarnates as well, as they're technically the same person with a distinctive personality. Now, just to be clear, I'm not making this up. There is precedence for this established in the Naruto universe. This is shown in the fact that Ashura and Inja, the sons of Hagoromo Ōtsutsuki, somehow found a way to defy conventional death and later reincarnated as Naruto and Sasuke. Now, of course, it didn't start with them. These guys have been reincarnating over and over again for the better part of a millennia. So, just as how they manifested as Hashirama and Madara prior to Naruto and Sasuke, there were many other lesser known reincarnates as well. They just weren't very significant to the plot itself. Now, the reason why that's important to note is because people believe that Ashura and Ninja just possess Naruto and Sasuke, which implies that they're separate entities. Yet if you go with the explanation provided by Hagoromo himself, that couldn't be furthest from the truth. You see, as stated in chapter 670, even after their flesh perished, the chakra the two possess continued to reincarnate across time without vanishing over and over again. He even goes as far as saying that Ashura has reincarnated as you, which means that Naruto is Ashura's current iteration, his next life. What this also confirms is that one's reincarnate can be different from oneself. I mean, the man himself outright states that Naruto's slightly dumb maverick nature is so unlike that of the previous reincarnates, even Ashura himself. And the reason why that's relevant to Boruto being Kaguya's father's reincarnate is because it can explain why Boruto's personality can be different from the Ox King while still being an incarnation of him. So the flesh itself, or the personality of said flesh, isn't what's relevant. The most important factor is the soul. With that said, the soul is also tied to chakra as stated by Hagoromo, which means that Boruto possesses the chakra of the Ox King. This then explains why he's able to summon Nue without a contract or the Gozo Tenno seal. It simply responded to the chakra of the Ox King. Now, there is another Ōtsutsuki statue that was shown in Kaguya's lava dimension, which looks like a female. This is most likely Kaguya's mother, Orihime, the daughter of the Sky King, which is very interesting because that would make Kaguya the daughter of the Ox King, Hikoboshi, and Orihime, the two missing Ōtsutsuki on the Ōtsutsuki tablet. Now, where this gets a bit crazier than it was before is the identity of the Sky King. You see, based on what I've gathered so far, it's said that the Jade Emperor, otherwise known as the Sky King, was an ordinary mortal that roamed the earth helping as many people as he could. But he was saddened because his powers could only just ease the suffering of humans. That's because back then the earth was a very difficult place to live, much harsher than it is now. People had to deal with a variety of monstrous beings, and they didn't have many gods to protect them. So because of this, he then retreated to a mountain cave to cultivate his Tao, which is pretty much life force energy. He then went on to complete some trials, each lasting about 3 million years. While at the same time, an evil entity had the ambition to conquer the immortals and gods in heaven and proclaim sovereignty over the entire universe. This evil entity also went on to complete the same trials that the Jade Emperor did, just coming short of around 200. He then felt confident that no one could defeat it, and that much was true at that point in time, since the gods were unable to stop it and it defeated all of them. Now, the Jade Emperor also finished his trials around this point in time as well, and while he was protecting the humans from the demons on the planet, he saw an evil glow radiating from heaven and knew something was amiss. So he ascended to heaven and saw that the evil entity was too powerful to be stopped by the gods. So he challenged it, they fought, mountains shook and rivers and seas toppled. Though due to his deeper and wiser cultivation and his benevolence instead of his might, the Jade Emperor won the battle, and after the evil entity was defeated, its army was scattered by the gods and the immortals. Now, this screams Shiba Ōtsutsuki to me. So, similar to the Sky King who underwent each of his trials for 3 million years in order to attain the power to ascend into godhood, Shiba did the same thing. As stated by Amado in chapter 75, Shiba underwent the process of karmic resurrection and devoured many chakra fruits over several millennia, which isn't quite the same as 8 million years of course, but you guys get the point. Amado also theorized that Shiba ascended to a higher plane of existence, which is likely the domain of the gods, as the chapter itself is titled. And by the way, this was confirmed by Momoshiki himself when he said that Shiba is no longer in this dimension, but what he said about him is true. So it could be the case that Kaguya is not only the daughter of the Ox King, but also the granddaughter of the Sky King, otherwise known as Shibai, from her mother's side. Now Sumire also has more connections to these guys and the Ōtsutsuki's as well, which is why I think she's important to the plot, such as her last name being Shigaraki, where the first kanji means death, the middle one means handle or pattern, and the last one being tree or wood. So the best interpretation of this would be handle of death or tree of death, which of course links back to the god tree, which devours all life on a planet. This is also somewhat similar to Nue, who also has the ability to absorb the chakra of anyone it touches. However, the fact that the Gosu Tenu seal depicts the body of Nue with a third eye, similar to the Ten-Tails. So Nue's final form, if it actually got the chakra it needed, possibly possesses a third eye, maybe the Renin Sharingan or the Jogan, which will also explain why Boruto always activated it in the presence of Nue. Now, there's also the fact that the name Kake or Keke, which Sumire used to hide their true lineage, actually refers to a Japanese-style bamboo, which is very interesting since the story of Princess Kaguya Hime is actually called the Tale of the Bamboo Cutter. That's because Kaguya was discovered as a baby inside the stalk of a glowing bamboo plant after she was sent to Earth. This of course links back to Kaguya's backstory in Shippuden, where she was found in a bamboo forest after arriving on the planet. So given the crossover with the story of Princess Kaguya and the story of Princess Orihime and Hikoboshi, what if Kaguya's backstory is a combination of both? What if, and just listen here, what if Kaguya's father, Hikoboshi, was killed because of an order given by the Ōtsutsuki, which would explain why his kimono is folded right over left, which is only used for the dead, while the female statue is folded left over right, which implies that she's still alive, at least at the time that statue was erected. So similar to the story of Hikoboshi, the Sky King separated the two lovers, and maybe in this iteration of the story he captured Orihime and killed Hikoboshi for whatever reason. Maybe that's why Kaguya revolted against the clan, betrayed Isshiki and took the chakra fruit for herself, then proceeded to form an entire army to defend against who the clan would send to capture her. The most likely case is that this didn't happen immediately, but most of the Kaguya planned to defect from the clan when she later found out what actually happened to her parents, maybe years or centuries later. Now, I could be wrong, but we'll see. Naruto is in trouble. He's now confirmed to be Jura's true target. And this is very important because there's been some confusion about whether he wants the Nine-Tails Naruto or Himawari based on statements made by Jura himself. He also confirms something very important, that being the why. Why does Jura want to consume Naruto Uzumaki? Well, the answer to that question is the tailed beast. You see, after his battle with Kawaki, which was awesome by the way, Jura went on to monologue about his thoughts about the concept of love and its effect on the humans around him. He notes that because of the sacrifice made by Inojin, Himawari awakened newfound power. And the same happened with Sarada as well. She too awakened newfound power and took down one of the Shinju. Both cases were extraordinary, something that can't be explained by normal means. Thus his conclusion that there must be a common thread linking all of them together, that being the concept of love. This caused him to somewhat evolve his views on love itself. While it can be a fatal flaw in humans, it can also be a source of unparalleled evolution, a source of great strength. Now this is relevant to Naruto because he also links it back to Kawaki. His combat ability is now far beyond what it used to be. So similar to Sarada and Himawari, he was able to gain immense power in a very short period of time. Why is that? Well, Jura of course is portrayed to be a very smart character, so he finds the answer to this question by provoking Kawaki. He notes that he never thought he would rush to Boruto's rescue. As far as he knows, there's only one thing in this world that Kawaki wants to protect, and it should be Naruto Uzumaki. He then tells Kawaki that he went to the village looking for Naruto, and was shocked to learn that he was pronounced dead. But looking into Kawaki's eyes at this moment, he knows for sure Naruto Uzumaki is still alive. So Jura's method is actually quite simple and pretty smart. He knows that Kawaki only cares for Naruto, at least that's what he believes, because I would argue that he does care about Himawari, but put that aside, he believes that Kawaki only cares for Naruto, so why exactly is he so concerned? What is he so worried about? What is he trying so hard to protect? Well, given Kawaki's reaction to Jura's insinuation, it must be the case that Naruto is indeed alive. Jura then goes on to note that he wants to devour him, Naruto Uzumaki that is, and that's because Naruto connected with many of the tailed beasts, which he believes was because of love. So he believes that if he consumes Naruto, him being a tailed beast himself, he might be able to understand what the meaning of love truly is. So the reason why Jura feels that he needs to consume Naruto isn't just because of some connection they might share, but also because he wants to understand the concept of love itself. And he believes that Naruto, that was able to connect with the Tail Beast on a deeper level, might be able to facilitate that. With that said, it doesn't answer the question of why he wants to learn about the concept of love in the first place. What triggered this interest? Well, I have a theory. See, as I mentioned before in prior videos, there are two ways to explain Jura's connection to Naruto and the Tail Beast. One is to work with this statement that says, the Ten Tails is just a fragment of the God Tree that created the universe, which implies that every Ten Tails is connected biologically, which also could mean that they're connected through chakra as well. So one could say that this current Ten Tails is experiencing the feelings of a past Ten Tails, whose chakra was separated into 9 Biju, the main one being the Nine Tails. Though there is a second option, as I said before, which is that this new Ten Tails is an offshoot of the past Ten Tails. You see, the origins of the Ten Tails in Boruto has always been a point of contention to some extent. Some believe that Isshiki left the planet after Kaguya betrayed him and found another Ten Tails, while the next faction believes that this is the Ten Tails they arrived with, since one was already planted when they got to the planet. This is purely based off what was shown in the anime in Naruto, which had Kaguya descending upon the land to an already established god tree, which her servant said had been there for several millennia. This is then contradicted by Boruto's manga, which outright stated that Kaguya arrived on the planet along with Isshiki, which is contradictory to what happened in the anime. But it also implied that they were the ones who brought the Ten Tails to the planet as well. Kaguya was also meant to be fed to that Ten Tails to evolve it into the god tree, by the way, which is why she betrayed Isshiki. So this was either a retcon, or you could simply call the anime episode filler, since none of that was in Naruto's manga. In that case, it is possible that Kaguya was fed to the Ten Tails and betrayed Isshiki after she was resurrected through karma, or she just fed Ishiki's lower half to the Ten Tails to trigger its evolution. It doesn't really matter. The point is that they were the ones who brought the Ten Tails we know and love per Boruto's manga, which means that the new Ten Tails in Boruto can't also be the Ten Tails they arrived with. Now this then leads me to my belief that the Ten Tails in Boruto is an offshoot of the one from Naruto, which also explains why it has a connection to, well, Naruto. This also goes back to a video I did a few months ago that explained what trees Matsuri was speaking to, which I believe is the Ten Tails from Naruto, which has roots spreading across the entire planet. This first happened when Kaguya came to the planet and cultivated her divine tree, because as stated by Amado in chapter 46, the divine tree is planted in the ground and its roots then grows deeply, reaching across the entire planet, just like a mold in your bathroom. That is how it sucks the chakra from all living things on said planet. We also, by the way, saw this happen in the anime as well, and was later confirmed to be draining energy from places such as Mount Miyaboku. And of course, I know that some of you guys might be saying, well kiddo, she said trees, not roots. So how does that make any sense? Well, I explained this in the prior video as well, that there is this thing called root sprouts that spawn from root systems and turn into miniature versions of the original tree. That explains why Kaguya was surrounded by multiple divine trees in that one panel, or why Momoshiki's planet had multiple divine trees planted at the same time. This initially led us to assume that Momoshiki simply had multiple Ten Tails in his possession, or that he simply reused the same Ten Tails over and over again on the same planet, when the truth is that the root of the divine tree simply sprouted copies of itself across the entire planet, which then grew to perform the same function of the original divine tree. This, by the way, would also explain why Mr. Momoshiki was able to sprout a divine tree in one of his dimensions back in chapter 5, which he attributed to the chakra he stole from the Eight Tails. What this means is that the plant organ of the Ten Tails, which is referring to the root sprout, can be used to mimic the function of the actual Ten Tails, likely to a much smaller extent, and simply feeding potent chakra to this root sprout, which is what he did with the chakra of the Eight Tails, can cause it to quickly grow into a fully formed divine tree. I go way more in depth on this in that video, so if you guys want to learn more, go and watch that one after this one. I'm not going to just repeat that entire video here, that would be crazy. Although, you know, that would be easier for me. But anyways, there's multiple evidence suggesting this possibility, such as Victor literally creating a copy of the Divine Tree using aspects of the Divine Tree from the war. So there you go. So the Boruto manga has been hinting towards the possibility of there being offshoots of the Divine Tree with multiple characters over and over again. But why? Well, one could argue that it's built up to the reveal that the Ten Tails in Boruto is a clone of the one from Naruto, the same Ten Tails that Kaguya merged with. This would then explain why Jura, who is the incarnation of the Ten Tails, wants to consume Naruto. The original Ten Tails was the complete form of all the Bijus combined, including Kurama. In fact, the Ten Tails absorbed the half of Kurama that resided in Naruto and built a connection with him for many years, along with the fact that Naruto himself formed a bond with not just Kurama but all 9 of them. So if the Ten Tails, after it gained consciousness, was to have a deep connection with a Jinchuriki due to its connection to the Biju its chakra created, it makes sense that this person would be Naruto. There's also this aspect of Kaguya as well, because again, Kaguya merged with the Ten Tails. And this is important because Kaguya was the first Ōtsutsuki to experience the concept of love. And this is purely based on something Kaguya herself said when speaking about the Ōtsutsuki, which is that love doesn't work on them. They only understand power. And I always found this very strange to some extent because either Kaguya went through some genetic change that allowed her to be capable of love because she did fall in love with a human and had kids, or this statement by Kaguya is just flat out false and the Ōtsutsuki are capable of love, they just need to experience it. Also, even the structure of the sentence implies that she's different because she says love doesn't work on them, not that it doesn't work on us. So this could really go either way, to be honest. I guess we'll see soon enough. But there's this constant theme that love doesn't work on the Ōtsutsuki, which also ties into why Sarada and Sumire might be immune to omnipotence. And not because they themselves are Ōtsutsuki, but because they're in love with one, which would be Boruto. But that's a topic for another video. The point of this is to say that there might be some influence of Kaguya actually knowing what love feels like seeping into this Ten Tails, which causes Jura to question what that feeling is. It might seem like a massive stretch, but you know, it could also be correct, so I guess we'll see. Jura is one of the strongest characters we've ever seen in this universe. There is no doubt about it. Being able to contend with an above Jigen level entity is no small feat, but that doesn't mean he's unbeatable. In fact, there's currently a character on the battlefield that has the power to end this battle immediately, and his name is Kawaki. You see, this has been on my mind ever since chapter 23 when Kawaki snuck upon Jura. He was able to pierce him with his rod before he was able to perceive him. And this of course reminded us of when Boruto stomped on Code's face in chapter 1 of Two Blue Vortex. It's kind of a similar situation. The difference here is that while Boruto was stronger and faster than Code, Kawaki should be weaker than Jura. And even if one wants to argue that Kawaki is faster than Jura, he shouldn't be blitz levels above him. Which simply means that Kawaki didn't just fly over there to Jura and then pierce him before he could perceive him. He definitely used his ability to shrink to a very small size, which prevented Jura from being able to detect him. This of course is very important because Kawaki has another dojutsu ability which everyone seems to have forgotten about. And that of course is Daikokuten. This allows him to send anyone and anything to a dimension where time doesn't flow, freezing them in place. Which means that Kawaki could, of course, send Jura to that location to win the battle. And this, of course, by the way, could have been done in this very moment while Kawaki was in the shrunken state. He could have teleported Jura to that dimension instead of trying to pierce him with the rod. And by the way, I'm not gonna knock Kawaki for this because, of course, one would assume, and it is logical to assume, that stabbing someone through the head with a rod would kill them. Now I'm sure someone is going to say, well kiddo, Kawaki was in a shrunken state, so he couldn't have used Daikokuten while already using Sukinai Kona. And to that I say, you are wrong. I know some of you guys probably thought I was gonna say, you're right, because that's what I usually say. But no, you're wrong, because Boruto actually did this in chapter 78, I believe, when he tried to capture Boruto. We know this because after Boruto absorbed the portal itself, Kawaki then returned to his normal state, which means that it was shrunken. which also means that you can use both abilities at the same time. So Kawaki at this point in the story is walking around with an ability to one-shot 100% of the characters in the universe, at least to his knowledge. And the reason why I say that is because it could be the case that some characters have some immunity to time freeze and they might not be frozen when he sends them to that dimension. This of course is also important to mention because I'm sure someone is gonna argue, yo, why would Kawaki send Jura to the dimension that has Naruto when Naruto is Jura's target? It doesn't make sense. And again, to that I say, you are correct, that doesn't make sense, I'm gonna say that. But also, Kawaki did try to send Boruto to that dimension where Naruto was, despite knowing that Momoshiki wants to kill Naruto, so he literally already did what we're saying that it would be stupid to do. And the reason why he's trying to kill Boruto at this point is because he can't send him there because every time he tries to, Boruto absorbs it. Although that might be an option at this point since Boruto can't use the Karma Seal, so Kawaki, think about it. Hold on, Kawaki might have actually thought about this already because based on what he said in the flash forward scene, he's trying to send Boruto where the 7th is, which is in Daikokuten. So maybe Kawaki is actually thinking like me, yo, you can't use the Karma Seal, so I'm gonna send you there now because you can't absorb the portal. And this might actually explain why Kawaki was surprised in that scene when Boruto went on to activate the Karma Seal he shouldn't be able to use. Very interesting. But yeah, this is about Kawaki and Jura, so let's get off that tangent. The point I'm trying to make here is that Kawaki can use that ability to take care of Jura if it gets to that point. And even though we have moved past this point in the chapter where he could have used it, he could still go on to use it later on. He could shrink again and then try to surprise Jura. And to our knowledge, Jura doesn't have the ability to absorb jutsu or chakra, and he hasn't used it despite the abilities that have been used against him. And also, we have no reason to believe that Jura knows what that jutsu is or what it does. So even if Kawaki was to spawn the portal on Jura, why would he try to dodge it or try to escape it? He has no idea what it does. And based on what we've seen in character for Jura, he likes taking damage for some reason. Like, he'll just allow people to hit him with jutsus because he feels like he can take it. And this might be a case where he literally does that. Oh, this jutsu is not going to damage me, and then he just teleports him to Daikokuten. You know, it could work. It's similar to when Boruto surprised Isshiki with the portal to send him away. It seems as if once the portal covers enough of the person's body, they can't do anything to escape it. And I'm sure no one thinks that Karma V1 Boruto is anywhere near Isshiki level. So Kawaki can still be weaker than Jura and be able to trap him in the portal if he catches him off guard. Now this brings me to the power section because I'm sure some people argue that Jura is simply just too strong for Kawaki to capture him using Daikokuten. He's just gonna brute force out of the portal, which, as I explained, Isshiki didn't do it, which means by some mechanic the portal traps the person and prevents them from physically moving away unless they have the power to absorb it. The next option is to say that part 1 Karma V1 Boruto is somehow stronger or as strong as Isshiki, which means this portal was just too strong for Isshiki to brute force from it, which I'm sure most people don't agree with, but let me know in the comment section, of course. With that said, there's also something else everyone seems to be forgetting about, which is the fact that Kawaki isn't even in his strongest form. Like, this version 1 state is far weaker than version 2, which of course is when they have the horn protruding from their skin. Boruto is far stronger in that state, and Kawaki is far stronger in that state as well. Which is why I think it has to be the case that Jura is either holding back significantly or maybe hasn't tapped into his true power because he doesn't know that it's there. Because there's no way base Boruto is pulling off the feats that he was doing, actually contending with Jura, and then we have base Kawaki doing what he did, surprising Jura, and now we have Karma 1 Kawaki contending with Jura based on the spoilers that we saw. We covered that a few days ago. But we're supposed to believe that Kawaki can't beat him by himself, even though he hasn't even touched the peak of his power. Though there's the argument that they don't have the horn state anymore that someone did mention, and all that power pretty much coalesced into the version 1 state, which would explain why Kawaki went to get a power up instead of trying to use that form against Jura, and also why they didn't use those forms in the endgame based on the flash forward scene. But I think the argument could be made that Kawaki simply knew that the form wouldn't work against Jura based on him getting knocked out by 2 hits in version 1, and it could also explain the flash forward scene by saying that they simply haven't gone into their strongest forms as yet. So this isn't a concrete theory by any means whatsoever, but it is a possibility. That's what I will say. So it is a possibility that we never see those horned states again, and based on what Kawaki does in this fight in his V1 state, that is the cap of his power. Now this is the fun part. I do wonder, and this kind of takes us back to the entire Thanos versus Ant-Man theory back in 2019, because if we're being serious here, if we're using all our options, Kawaki could simply shrink down to a very small size, fly into Jura's ear like Isshiki did to Jigen, and then find this Thorn Soul bulb and just rip it out of his body from the inside. And this seems to be possible based on the fact that Ryu was able to literally remove his Thorn Soul from his body and use it as bait for Team 7, which implies that the Thorn Soul is literally inside of them somewhere, maybe the heart or something. Although it could be the case that wasn't a Thorn Soul and he just kind of replicated it using his sand. I do think it's kind of weird since it had the white spikes on it and the Renegon, so, you know, maybe. Although Gar's sand has always been magic no jutsu since he was able to transform it into skin and also into different clothing with different colors, and there was no poof or smoke. He just literally formed a sand shield and it just slowly turned into different things. So hey, maybe Shinju can do the same thing with his sand. But of course, headcanon aside, if it is the case that the Thorn Soul is there inside their bodies, Kawaki can simply crawl inside, find it, and then return to his normal size, thus destroying Jura's body from the inside. There's also the option to do something similar to what Isshiki did to Jigen, which is to connect his body to his brain like a parasite, maybe using his scientific ninja tool hand, and then control Jura from the inside. I know it sounds crazy, okay? But it's a possibility, okay? It's a possibility, that's all it is. But yeah, that's it for the video. If you guys have any thoughts on it, do you think this is just crazy yapping and nonsense, or do you think some of this is actually plausible? Okay, just let me know in the comment section and let me know your arguments. But if you guys like the video, drop a like if you're new, subscribe, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace.